to all the panelists that have shared their insights, their fears, their frustrations, their anger, their ideas, their ambitions, their innovation with us. Thank you to all of you. Whether you're government ministers, whether you are private sector entrepreneurs, whether you're from the UN, whether you're from the EU, whether you're from small island developing states, or whether you're from any one of many state agencies in Ireland that have been involved in the events today, thank you for your insights. I've certainly learned a lot over the last 48 hours. I've learned a lot about other parts of the world, that we want to be more involved in partnership in terms of impacting on the problems that have been outlined, in some cases in very stark terms. When I hear Peter talking about +2 degrees meaning an absence of coral in the ocean, I don't think it really hits home for those of us who don't live on small island states. Even bigger islands like Ireland and Malta, maybe our publics don't quite get that. But if you were to say to people in Ireland, imagine a world without trees, people would look at you very differently in the context of the potential impact. And it's a bit like that in the context of the ecosystems that are supported by coral. And it's not just in warm water. We have very significant amounts of cold water deep sea coral off our coast that needs protecting also. And so we are, over the last 2 days or so, really talking about extraordinary challenges and risks to the kind of existence that many of us have taken for granted and continue to do so. And I hope that we can carry some of the conversations and connections and friendships that have been made over the last 48 hours now through into the next meetings that are going to happen. Whether that be in Norway, whether it be at an Irish Fiji party in New York, whether it be in Santiago in December, or whether indeed it be in Lisbon in June of next year, when I hope we will have significant progress to report and to commit to. And certainly Ireland looks forward to working with everybody in this room to that effect. In terms of learnings for me, from an Irish perspective, I think we've learned very well over many years since our independence that our strength is in multilateralism. Our strength is in working with others, building friendships and contacts and trust with other countries. It's how we get things done. It's how Malta gets things done too. And the truth is that when Tara says she can't understand why many of the representatives from SIDS countries aren't screaming at people in UN headquarters in New York, I can understand that sentiment. But the truth is, you know and we know that politics doesn't change things purely by screaming and shouting. It changes things by the building of power and collaboration through strength together. And that is what we need to do in terms of having a voting strength and indeed having a collective strength of argument backed up with science and facts that are not disputed by anybody credible, that can actually force the kind of change along the timelines that are necessary. And I certainly pledge that Ireland will want to do that with you. For those of you who are Irish in the audience, I know some of you are saying, start practicing what you're preaching from this stage. And that's a fair criticism. Ireland has not done enough on climate change. Ireland has not done enough in terms of ocean conservation. We have some of the most extraordinary natural resources on the planet. We're starting to use them in terms of renewable power generation, but we have so much more to do. And I'm very conscious of the responsibilities that we have before we turn up in New York, before we turn up in Santiago, before we turn up in Lisbon next year, that we need to ensure that we are giving leadership at home in order to be credible abroad. And while we have already an exciting and expanding and growing development program and partnership ambition in much of this space now, we also need to change opinion and change politics and make political decisions in Ireland that can ensure that we can say many of the things that you in small island states are already saying in terms of what you're doing to protect your own natural environments and to respond to the challenges of a changing climate. And our government meets for a day-long meeting next Monday to agree a new climate strategy for Ireland. And I hope that many of you will take the time to read that. And I hope that you will see that we are learning from many of you in terms of the sense of urgency that we have an obligation to respond to. So can I say, there's too much for me to try and summarize in a short thank you session, which is what this is. But ultimately it comes down to what Secretary Kerry referred to as the political will. The capacity of humankind to respond to the enormity of this challenge is there if the will is there to deliver it. And ultimately, that is where we need to have our focus. And if you ask me for 3 words, Tara, they're pretty simple. We must succeed. We must succeed. Otherwise, if we were to meet again in 10 years' time here in City Hall, this city will probably be intact. But some of the small islands that you call home today may not exist, may not even exist any longer in a way that allows communities to live and economies to grow. So that's what we're talking about. So to all of you who've taken the time to travel very long distances and who I know have long distances to travel home, albeit in some cases to slightly warmer climates than you've experienced this weekend. Thank you for being with us and consider Ireland your friend on this challenge. And I look forward to taking many of the conversations that we've had over the last 48 hours and turning them into practical cooperation and partnership and assistance into the future. So have a safe trip home and thank you very much for making the last 48 hours a very, very special time for an awful lot of the people who are hugely committed to this area. People like Peter Heffernan, who has transformed Ireland's approach to oceans by practically single-handedly building a marine institute in the west of Ireland. And I would strongly recommend any of you who are staying here for any time to go and visit that facility. It's phenomenal. There are others in this room too. Cecil Beamish, for many years, who has been responsible for a transition in the way in which we approach fishing in Ireland. People like Admiral Mark Mellett, the first naval officer ever to be the Chief of Staff of the Irish Defence Forces, changing attitudes and wanting the Defence Forces to play their part in a change to a more renewable approach towards how they do things. Tony Lewis, who's somewhere here, who was the pioneer in Ireland in terms of developing wave energy technology, a space that Ireland now considers itself to be a world leader in, and many others, from NGOs, from environmental organizations, from marine-based institutions, and so on. Thank you for all of the work that you have been doing for decades, and I hope that you are starting to see in conferences like this one the fruits of the work and the changing attitudes that you have been demanding for many years, but now is finally being heard. And I want this little country to be a world leader in managing our marine environment and of course to play our part and making the hard choices in doing that to the global collective challenge that we face from a climate perspective. So let's measure progress. Let's challenge and test each other each time we meet, because I suspect we'll be meeting regularly. over the next number of years as this challenge continues to intensify into the future. So thank you very much, and safe home.